All right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. It's V the Guerrilla Economist coming to you live on this edition of Rogue ESW, folks. Check us out, RogueNews.com. Follow us on X at ESW Rogue News. And with that being said, we have a friend, a good buddy of ours, and I'm so happy to have him back. I'm so happy that we're back on track to have him back. Is the one and only Matthew Aaron, folks. If you don't know who Matthew Aaron is, my God, you need to, crawl up out of that rock you've been under. He is my favorite researcher, historian, scholar. I mean, you name it. He is the brain trust. I just call him the brain trust. And I'll tell you right now, folks, you can follow him over at CanadianPatriot.org as well as RisingTideFoundation.net. Also, check out his Substack. Subscribe to there. It's Substack.com/Matthew Aaron. Links would all be in the description box. And also join his Telegram group where he puts on weekly seminars that you guys could participate in. And don't ever forget to go on Amazon and get his books, because let me tell you something. The books that he has written on the origins of the United States, the founding of the United States, it's volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. Get it. It is a magnum opus of where we were, where we are, and it kind of gives you a framework so you understand where we're going. And with that being said, Matthew, welcome back, buddy.
Thanks, V. I missed those introductions, and yeah, it's great to be back, man. It's been way too long, so I'm looking forward to today's chat.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, and also, yeah, no, just hello to Algo as well, man. I appreciate also just getting to meet you face to face. We've spoken over Telegram, and I've never actually seen you and engaged with you face to face in the flesh, or at least mediated by this digital screen. So good to meet you too.
That's my pleasure. And it's by the way, everybody, there's a great Telegram channel that Matt has. So I've got your link for your website in the description, so they can kind of go there and probably find everything else. Sound about right?
That sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Perfect. Matt, there's so much stuff that has occurred, so many things that are happening. My God, man, my God! In the almost year that we took off trying to reconfigure ourselves and kind of rebuild ourselves and circling back. My God, the things that have transpired from Trump's election to the travesty that's happening in Gaza, to the winding down of the Ukraine war, to the Epstein list. It goes on and on and on. So, dude, look, you have no time limits here. Like, you want to go over an hour, we'll go over an hour. I have no problems with it. Let's get into it. Where do you want to start?
Well, there's any number of choices. I guess, like our last show that we did together was Multipolar Reality, and I think that one of the key themes that animated every single episode of that show was, and even in its previous iterations, when we were still calling it The Great Game and The Geopolitical Hour or something like that. We went through a lot of rebrandings, but the core theme that stayed the same was the idea of looking at the world from the vantage point that all of history is shaped by a clash between two opposing ideas of systems, one being a closed system, the other an open system. And I'm not talking, were confused by the language, and sometimes we would get a confused watcher who would say, oh, you're for open systems, so does that mean you're for George Soros and his open society, you crypto Soros fascist? And it's like, no, listen to what we're saying. It's not the same thing. Open system simply means, from a scientific standpoint, the conceptualization that everything is a system, right? Our biological organism is a system. Every cell that makes us up is its own complex system. Every particle, every molecule is a system that's much more. It's not simple. And every solar system and every leaf and every you name it, there's systems within systems, and all things that are conceptualizable as a unity, as a thought with its own identity and its own purpose, is being shaped by processes both within and outside of that thing. Human economies are just like that. Now the question is, do we when we look at a system, do we think of it as being self-contained, with the whole being the sum of its parts, or do we think of each system as being more than the sum of its parts? Like the famous example people would often use would be the person who's trying to figure out what's the principle that makes the kitty cat live and go meow, and they would take it into a lab, and a materialist who thinks that the whole is simply the sum of its parts would assume that the thing that causes the life principle in the cat can be found by just cutting the cat into smaller and smaller pieces, and somewhere you'd get a sense of the mechanism that allows for the cat to meow and to purr and be cute and all that other stuff and to breathe. So the first thing they do is they kill the cat, and the thing that they're then looking for is gone, because the thing that they were looking for was occupying a space that was beyond the simple addition of all of the circuitry of the physical cat. So the same thing for humans. If you're an oligarch, you tend to think of human beings as being something which is kind of like animal-like. Our economy, our society is made up of a bunch of animals that only want pleasure. They only want to eat, have sex. They want to avoid pain. And so you can use these mechanisms to control or behaviorally nudge the society that you're trying to manage into a certain direction according to whatever agenda you and your oligarchical brethren might feel is important. And so that idea that the world, the human economy is the sum total of its parts is a closed system. That's an idea of it manifests in another idea of entropy, right? That there's only a limited amount of energy to go around to sustain the system. And thus all we can do is fight for diminishing returns as the energy within the system drains down in time to a heat death. And you can see how geopolitically that manifests in the form of Mackinder's geopolitics and other things like that. So the idea that controlling resources will give whoever controls the resources the ability to manage wars, divide to conquer, and thus, control the slow decline into a dark age, which they think is the natural state. So all oligarchs think that the characteristics of human societies when we collapse into dark ages is the natural order, because that's where we get evidence of the least amount of serious change. And they don't think change is natural. They think stasis is natural. So they don't think the thing that is qualified as life, which is constant change and growth, that they think is unnatural. Death, which is defined by, when you're dead and buried and you're rotting in the grave, you're changing the least, right? And so that's what they think is their model for what is the healthy principle. A healthy human recognizes that life is the dominant principle, and that change is normal, but not random change directed towards qualitative improvement. So the fact that we have 8-9 billion soon of the human species on the earth is not an aberration. It's not an abnormal thing. It was made possible because there are attributes within the human condition that we don't find within cats or rabbits or dogs or anything like that in nature. They're all fine for what they are, but they don't make discoveries of principles. They don't discover electricity. They don't discover new forms of communicating poetry and language. They don't do that. They just do what they do, and that's fine that they do it, but humans do. And so when we translate that to new discoveries, all of a sudden we create new resources, right? Fusion power, the atomic power itself as a field of study allowed for things like uranium to become resources, whereas before that they were just like low value tints you got in certain types of pitch blende that you would dig up and use for dyes for church windows. And that was the only value of uranium before the atomic age. After the atomic age, when we started discovering that there were these powerful attributes within the atoms that make up all of material creation, we're like, oh shit, this uranium stuff that we were treating like garbage is all of a sudden really valuable, and it changes our relationship to the entire universe. We could do more, we could sustain more people at a higher quality of life, but we could do more damage too if we allow for, tolerate laws of the jungle thinking to shape a society that wields that type of power. Sure, we can blow ourselves up. That's possible too. So now I think I say all that as a word of preamble to get in the current situation, because right now, the multipolar alliance, it's something which I think, people all have heard the word, whether they're cynical and some people think it's all controlled opposition. Other people I think are too optimistic and they think, the multipolar alliance has already defeated the oligarchy and it's all smooth sailing, except a few little things have to be worked out. I think both extremes are mistaken. The fight is serious. I think in my experience, I think I might have underestimated the oligarchy sophistication a little bit in the past. I realized that I probably undervalued it's all, some of the I guess sophistication is the word, but the occult aspect of the control mechanism of what shapes the mystery cults and the geopolitical considerations of the oligarchy, I undervalued its influence. That being said, one of the strategic points of battle on the multipolar front that emerged with the alliance of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in 2015 in a big way when they merged the new Silk Road that Xi Jinping had announced onto the world in 2013 in September, along with the Eurasian Economic Union that had come online around that same time, of Vladimir Putin, and you had a variety of Eurasian nations. Armenia at that time was very friendly to Russia, being one of the dominant nations that were part of the Eurasian Economic Union, Belarus being another. There's about 6, and they merged. And then that expanded in its to be more integrated into the BRICS operating system as a strategy of basically redefining what nations are around civilizational states and long-term large-scale mega projects that would give vitality to all parts within the provinces, within the nations that participated within the Belt and Road Initiative that expanded into the Arctic by 2019 with Polar Silk Road. The Polar Silk Road being sort of the Arctic extension, right, of the Belt and Road Initiative that Russia endorsed as well. The Russians called it the Silk Road on ice, but it's the same thing. Basically, rail maritime shipping that would cut 10 days off of shipping to Europe to Rotterdam by moving through the Northwest Passage above Russia to China, and that the other more circuitous and I would say dangerous route would involve shipping going through Straits of Malacca, through the Suez Canal, or down through the Cape of Good Hope, but usually through the Straits of Gibraltar and not Gibraltar, sorry, the Straits of the Red Sea. And so you have the Bab el Mandeb Strait into the Red Sea. That's a choke point right next to Yemen and Ethiopia. Then the other one would be the Suez Canal and into Europe that way. That's 10 to 15 days longer of a transit than the Arctic. So that was the general momentum, and that currently still is the strategy. The Polar Silk Road has taken some big hits in the last couple of years, so it's moving much slower than it was supposed to. But still, the dominant greater Eurasian integration strategy to unify, and again, this involves now Iran. It involves Egypt, though weakened. It still involves that. UAE became a member of the BRICS with Iran and with Egypt. So, but Iran is the key. Iran is the key. So from Iran, you have the middle corridor moving through big scale corridors from China. And, recently, just before the Israeli strike a month and a half ago, China just completed from Xi'an a 9,000 kilometer rail line, the biggest one from Xi'an in the east of China down all the way into Iran. That would connect into other networks into Iraq and beyond towards Turkey and Europe, as well as bridges down into Africa. So that had to be disrupted, and I think that played a role in the Israeli strikes. And the current peace deal is very precarious. The other aspect of integration, though, is not just the Iran role on that front, but also the Northwest Transportation Corridor, which was signed into I guess it became a policy between Iran, Russia, and India back in 2001, and that involves goods and development, basically the flow of goods from the north of Russia down through St. Petersburg, down through Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, down into Iran, and into ports on the southern ports of Iran, especially Chabahar port, and thence onward into India and back and forth. And that already is a multimodal port with also extensions on the east side of the Caspian too. through Kyrgyzstan and yeah, there's a few other nations that are involved in that on the east side. But all that to say, that's also been targeted. So both these have been targeted, I think, now in the last few months in a serious way.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that also with the disruptions that have really targeted Azerbaijan, which plays a key role in stabilizing this region. And they're being really messed with, and it's very dangerous what's going on right there. So we could talk about that if you want more detail or whatever angle you'd like to take it. These are points being hit at and fragile cracks that are being smashed at by the oligarchy, which causes me some concern.
Yeah, things are really ratcheting up, man. So let's go into that, because we're all familiar with all the current breaking points, and I don't think people are paying attention to what you're just laying out for us right now. Let's get into that, because it is also concerning for me as well. It's crazy, man. My senses over the last 6 months have been really going off in terms of an alarm, right? I think we are very perilously close to a global event that, if it's not handled properly by some of the idiotic leadership that's in the West, it can literally spiral out of control.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest concern. The multipolar world is here. It is unbeatable. It is the new reality. It is the future of humanity. And the West has nothing to offer but marketing materials and axioms and just nothing, literally. And the craziest part is what they're willing to do for that nothing, to maintain this illusion of control, is very concerning to me. So go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, well, me too. And so there does seem to be some acquiescence for the time being to the idea that the multipolar reality is here, and that's what we have to accept and adapt to. But not all people who utilize the term multipolar mean the same thing with the words that they say. So if a Klaus Schwab says it, it means one thing to Klaus Schwab.
Right.
If a Xi Jinping or Putin say it, it means another thing completely to them. And if a Mark Rubio says it, it means something different to him. And I think that that's an important thing, because people get lost sometimes in words and nominalism, the belief that the meaning of something or the essence of something is found in the word and not in the context of how and the intention of how the word is being used and for what intention. And what understanding of the universe you think you're living in. If you think you're living in a closed universe that is animated by death, as the standard model of quantum mechanics that's hegemonic in the scientific world, which also shapes the economic doctrines that we're taught in Harvard and Yale and Oxford. If we believe that heat death standard model idea of the universe moving slowly towards a point of basically cold absence of action, which is what people think of if they believe entropy or the second law of thermodynamics is what's animating things, then what we will say when we utilize the term multipolarity is very different from somebody who thinks in terms of a creative, growing universe that is not animated by death, but rather greater states of perfectibility in life. So it's going to be two different things. So I think one thing that I've noticed is that ultimately, like when Klaus Schwab or some of these UN depopulationists utilize multipolarity, and I think there's two things that they mean. Number one is that they're trying to, or that they intend. Number one is that they're trying to get cozy with nations that have gone off the reservation and that are not participating willfully in the self-annihilation of their populations and their civilizational states. So they're trying to use sort of like a cozying up language. Hey, we all speak the same language. Let us back into your house. Like where Soros got kicked out of China back in 1989. He got kicked out and he was never allowed to come back in. Increasingly, China has, since especially 2013, carried out the biggest crackdown on corruption we've ever seen in any nation. And I'm writing an article right now just that's putting my mind into, like, I'm just studying all of the high level officials that have been punished, given 15, 25-year life sentences, in some cases death sentences in China. We're talking big names here. The top leaders of major, like the chair of the Bank of China got life in prison earlier this year, or late last year. The former justice minister of China, three former chiefs of intelligence, the head of Chinese Interpol, have gotten life in prison during the anti-corruption crackdown launched by Xi Jinping at the same time that he launched the Belt and Road Initiative. And he did this because you had these foreign agents, Jack Ma, in both the private sector and public. Jack Ma being somebody who was incubated by a network of Yale, Sullivan, and Cromwell-run agents, specifically this guy Joseph Tsai, who now lives in New York, who co-founded Alibaba, which itself is sort of the Alibaba Group, is the head of Ant Group, AntPay, Alipay, all of these social credit, abuse of social credit mechanisms that have been brought into China didn't emerge through the Chinese government. It emerged through these Western-directed agencies that are tied to the World Economic Forum. Jack Ma himself was a transhumanist who is a trustee of the World Economic Forum. He's a partner with George Soros on a number of projects. He's a partner of Melinda Gates, a partner with Michael Bloomberg on digital banking and other things. So, these guys infiltrated China. They worked with agents within China to allow for greater control over the levers of power from especially the 1990s to the 2015-16 period, when the clampdown began, and or the anti-corruption purges were really launched. And then what we started seeing is a major war, which the intelligentsia of China, the patriots, didn't want to lose, and they knew that if they did lose it, they would lose the whole of the civilization that they were in charge with for this generation to keep alive. So Jack Ma got taken down when he called for a coup d'etat. Sesame Pay, that's the other one, Sesame Pay, which was integrated very much into the Chinese banking system. But it was never Chinese. It was never a Chinese thing. And they would use predatory loans that they would extend. There's 10 times more young people under 35 years of age in China who are now in unpayable debt than there was 10 years ago. And all of this is because of these Western-directed private agencies. Their home base of operations, the home base of operations of Alibaba Group, is not China. They have a head office in China, but their actual headquarters, their company itself. Can you guess where it's based? Alibaba Group.
Sorry, man, I cut out. What'd you say?
Oh, I just said, can you guess where the Alibaba Group is based?
Do they talk like this when in their office?
Close. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, British Cayman Islands.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, the British Cayman Islands is the company, the company that is actually the company that Alibaba Group is registered under. I think it's Trident or something. Is itself, its primary investors are, its dominant investors are Carlyle Group, Warburg Pincus, Bloomberg. These are the groups that actually have more to do with the abuses of social credit in China than anything Chinese.
How about
and that's
Tencent?
what China's been.
Sorry to interrupt. Is Tencent in that same kind of group?
It's in the same sphere, but it maintains a relative independence from that, but it's also tied into a lot of the same players. So that's the next part of my article that I'm writing, is I have to map out the Tencent leadership and origins and then fuse it in to see to what degree it overlaps with this Alibaba Group. But yeah, it's definitely connected. So, people need to understand that this is what the Chinese government has been doing battle with. They took Jack Ma out of play back in 2020. He was in exile in Japan. He had to go to Japan because he couldn't get anything done. He wasn't allowed to really touch the organizations he supposedly owned. And he was allowed to come back in 2023, but on a leash. So that's something to keep in mind. But China's they're in a battle for their lives right now. They've got a legal battle several legal battles to impose regulation onto the different Ant Pay, Ant Group, Alipay entities, as well as the abuse. Because we often hear in the West the abuses of Chinese workers who are forced to work, like 7 days a week, 13 hours a day, blah blah blah. That some of that is true, but a lot of that has to do with these private companies tied to Jack Ma who do this stuff, and they're at again there are major legal fights with the Chinese government to force them to abide by labor laws. So that's going on, and it's being completely ignored by people in the West who are being fed propaganda by a bunch of influencers who have been spread out, especially amongst alternative media, but that overlap with what Fox News and what even NBC and the left media is saying about how our big enemy is China, to weaponize us so that we give our acquiescence or our consent to what's happening right now, which is like as we speak, as you and I are talking, as us three are just having this show. There are five simultaneous war games that are happening on China's perimeter. One in Australia that involves like 18 countries. Another one that involves both a synergy of Space Force and the Air Force that involves like 19,000 soldiers, 300 aircraft. Another one in the Philippines that's somehow disconnected, but it's also a simultaneous thing. Another one in Taiwan, the biggest military exercise in Taiwan's history, overseen by, we know that there's 500 US soldiers who are there at least. They're acting like they're not involved, but they've been there, especially with Green Berets, who have been training Taiwanese soldiers in preparation for the oncoming war with China that they believe has to happen by 2027 for some reason. And Taiwan looks like it's being set up to be the Ukraine of the Pacific. So you've got 19,000 Taiwanese reservists who have been brought out to participate in these war exercises based on the war with China. They're using HIMARS missiles, military equipment that they purchased from the United States, first time ever, long-range missiles that can hit Chinese territory. We have the Philippines that just signed a trade deal as well with the United States, as did Japan this week, that also involves giving the U.S. military more access. They've already built an additional 4 new U.S. military bases in the Philippines, and now the U.S. has full, unbounded access to all of these military bases and the entire Philippine military itself. Japan, also is a 58,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan. And
did you also hear what's going on with Azerbaijan and the bases that the U.S. is secretly building? They built a defense corridor directly in Azerbaijan on the northern border of Iran. This is incredible to me because you're having a bloody empire that has no industrial capacity to fight a war. And every real metric by every professional who studies this for their entire lives will tell you that in an actual conventional war of the United States versus Russia or the United States versus China, we would last 8 days before we're out of munitions. 8 days. Okay? We have no industrial capacity for this, but yet we are provoking on all this. And you have morons on the MAGA side of things saying, this is 5D Connect 4, guys. This is 5D Connect 4. This is all part of some grandiose plan. Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's unnerving a little bit. I mean, also Armenia too, right? So you have Armenia that just signed over a 99-year lease to a U.S. private company that they're calling now, I think tentatively, the Trump Bridge that's what it is. Transportation Corridor.
Yeah.
And that involves like 1,000 U.S. troops who will now go down and maintain this. 1,000 U.S. troops are going to go there now and maintain this corridor. They're going to take like 40% of the revenue for a century. Armenia gets 30% of the revenue that they pay for transit of goods to and from it, and oil and other things from the Caspian to Europe via, it'll move through Azerbaijan. That's where the Baku oil fields are. So this pipeline, these corridors are going to connect all the way through Azerbaijan, through Armenia, and onward into Turkey and supposedly then into Europe. And again, it involves strategic interests of Iran, like you said, the positioning of 1,000 U.S. troops and God knows what else on Iran's upper border, and as well the idea of, it seems like there's some weird synergy, weird synergy between the Azeri leadership and Erdogan, both of whom have a certain common attributes. but who have been meeting more and more regularly and seem to have some weird pact or deal to consolidate some cooperative policy with each other. The Armenians who were put there, I mean, the Armenian government was largely the consequence of Pashinyan, right? When he took power, it was largely a George Soros coup in 2018 that overthrew a pro-Russian government of Armenia back then. And Pashinyan has been working to, as Joaquin Flores has said, de-Armeniify Armenia, and make it a more Western pliable proxy. And Aliyev and Pashinyan seem to have been working a lot closer together, even though they've had historic hostilities. They met in Abu Dhabi. They've signed this trifecta with Turkey, and we know that Turkey has a greater Turkish revivalism, this neo-Ottoman agenda, which it seems I was hoping a few years ago that they had gotten over that shit when Erdogan realized that he had been targeted by the West as to be couped, utilizing a Western asset by the name of
You want to
Fethullah
know
Gulen.
something? I
Yeah.
actually, Fethullah Gulen, who was stationed out in Pennsylvania. I actually met the bodyguard of Erdogan, who was his bodyguard during the coup of
Really?
what was it, 2013 when the coup occurred in July,
Hmm.
right? And the guy showed me pictures.
No. It was 2016.
2016, yes, 2016, the coup. And I didn't believe him. And then he busted out his phone and he showed me the freaking pictures, dude. I was gobsmacked. He was like, that was a crazy time. We didn't know who was who. We didn't know who to trust. And he said there were some calls that were made in the back end that kind of settled things down, but they were going to take out Erdogan. And Fethullah Gulen was going to be put in there as the proxy puppet.
And weren't they trying to shoot him down in his?
There was an
airplane?
F-16. There was a Turkish F-16 that was right behind him that had a lock on him. They didn't fire, so they had some loyalty. And the whole thing, and I asked the bodyguard, and he goes by the name of Kevin, right? I don't know what his actual Turkish name is, but it's Kevin something. But I asked him. I said, "Hey, why didn't the F-16 fire?" He goes, "You see, what the U.S. underestimated is how many people in Turkey at that time loved Erdogan. They would have rejected Gulen." I was like, "Oh," but that was crazy. That was a crazy time. And then now you're seeing Erdogan flipping and flopping. He looks like flip flop, but he does whatever is what he thinks is in the best interest. But
yeah, that's the thing. Like, it seems like everything was laid out for him so well. When he consolidated power after having avoided the coup, largely thanks to FSB intelligence that provided him forward information to get the fuck out of Dodge, and get into your helicopter and avoid being murdered. So that gave him a huge edge, both in terms of public support as well as just a total purge of these Fethullah Gulen cult followers embedded throughout his government, throughout civil society, and a lot of it was purged. Not all of it, but a lot of it was purged. And so he had a huge amount of influence at that point to walk a line that was much more independent than anything I think any Turkish leader since maybe the days of Ataturk had ever enjoyed. And despite all of that, like he was having conversations regularly with Xi Jinping and with Putin, and the idea of Turkey being the bridge between the middle corridor was a really beautiful thing.
Right.
And the idea of just all you had to do was simply stop protecting the ISIS terrorists in Idlib. Just stop. Just don't do that. You don't have to do that. And stop with the ambition of trying to, destabilize Syria. Just try to do your best. There's hope that Bashar al-Assad was brought back into the Arab League, and there was healing. I think the Chinese and the Russians had a lot to do with that back channel bridge building again between Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian leader, the Saudi Arabian leadership. MBS met with him. They hugged. The UAE met with them. It was really becoming a healing process. Erdogan finally, he betrayed Bashar al-Assad quite a bit. They used to hang out together. They were family friends before the Arab Spring. Erdogan really stabbed him in the back. And so Bashar al-Assad had a really hard time with the idea of meeting with Erdogan, but it was beginning to thaw. And so all Erdogan had to do was just be cool and stop being a provocative bitch supporting ISIS as a proxy to justify this religious, because it's not just a geopolitical ambition, as far as I could tell, amongst the faction that Erdogan thinks he has to satisfy, of reviving the grandeur of the Ottoman Empire, which involves a territory something like 90% larger, if not more.
Well, he's gonna run into problems with the Zionists and the Greater Israel, because a good chunk of Turkey's part of that.
Well, that's the problem, right? Like and this is where this stuff always blows up, is that the empire has worked to promote ideologies in different parts of the world that all are expansionist, that all believe that they're the best, right?
Yes.
That all have a chosen people ideology, and they've catered it to different, whether it's the Ukrainian supremacists who believe that they are genetically endowed by just a better fitness to survive and thrive and should restore, like it doesn't work. You got Lithuanian, Polish-Lithuanian romanticists who have this romantic desire, obsession to revive the Polish-Lithuanian Empire that was an enemy to Russia. You've got similar things seeded into Albania, even the Albanians that has been used to provoke genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the former Yugoslavia area. So you've got all of these things, and in the case of the Middle East, there's no shortage of that. You even have Azerbaijan, which has their own idea of expanding Azerbaijan's borders to encapsulate all of our today's Armenia, and to take over a big chunk of Iran, who has a lot of Azeris in Iran. Yeah. Current is Iranian president Pezeshkian is Azeri. He was born in Azerbaijan, and it makes me wonder sometimes, like, what is his loyalties? The former president Raisi was killed in a helicopter on the border of Azerbaijan, and mysteriously with the defense minister. And so, it seems like the current leadership came to power through a bit of a coup that had to happen through the murder of former leaders. And I'm just speculating here, but that's what it looks like to me. I don't have insider info, but it definitely seems like you've got something incubating that's dangerous inside of Iran. Most of their leadership, their qualified military leadership, was murdered during the weirdly named 12-Day War. So that was a decapitation of decades and decades of lived experience by Iranian military leaders that all got murdered during that strike. That involved insider information provided by officials, agents of the IAEA, it seems. And we've got Israeli intelligence operatives, high-level Mossad affiliates, who have said and bragged that they have installed their assets into every level of influence within the Iranian government. Is that braggadocio, or is there some truth there? If there is some truth there, that's a big problem. So you've got this thing where, like you said, the Ottoman revivalists, who also want to take over like a third of Russian territory eventually. That's what they see as their divinely endowed jurisdiction.
It's funny to me, Matt, when you start studying central banking, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I realized, everywhere the central bank goes, where you have fractional reserve lending and central banking and whatnot, in order for it to thrive and proliferate, at some point, a mythology needs to be created in order to rile up the current population into believing a greater destiny. It's so necessary for central banking, in order to survive, to have a mythology for the people to believe, so they can go ahead and consume perpetual, be involved and participate in perpetual debt and in perpetual war. It's insane to me. Meanwhile, the real assets are siphoned out, and the real wealth is actually pillaged by these scumbags.
Yeah, it's true. It blinds people to the detail, because I guess as soon as you have this idea that there's this preordained determinism that favors some outcome beyond the influence of human will and human agency, all of a sudden your ability to morally judge individual actions that you do or that are committed by your allies as right or wrong all of a sudden is diminished quite a bit, because now because the ends are just, it's God's will after all
Yeah.
of the means that one can find to accelerate the move towards those just ends becomes infused by the justice of the outcome. And
Correct.
so you could see yourselves all of a sudden logically rationalizing, as many Zionists do, why it's necessary to, do things that involve the murder of civilians, the starvation of children. All of a sudden is just part of God's divine mysterious tapestry, the plan that we have to just both trust but also maybe help out with,
Exactly.
because God promised us this covenant 6,000 or whatever 3,000 years ago to create a greater Israel, territory like 800 times larger than the current borders of Israel itself, which means that all of those people who have been too comfortable living in Palestine or in Jordan or Iraq or Syria or much of Turkey, ironically, have to get ready to, or Lebanon, they have to like learn how to leave and give it over to the chosen people. So everything moves in that direction. So
Yeah.
you can see how, like you said, these borders overlap, and
Yep.
it's only a matter of time before you get a serious clash between the Turkish and the Israeli, greater Israeli and greater Turkish ideologues too.
Yeah. Absolutely right, man. Absolutely
Mm.
right. It's crazy.
No. Yep. It's nuts. So yeah, there's all these points of arson all over the chessboard,
Mm.
and I know there's some points. I don't want to be all like cynical and totally on the negative side of things. I know that there are points and hopes that some patriotic spirit can still find vitality and bring out something viable in a very, very decrepit, morally decrepit USA. And I hope that Trump has something within him that has the wits at least to recognize that World War III is not advisable, and it's better to cooperate with the more authentic multipolar alliance idea of cooperation, creation of new wealth, the building up of new corridors of development through peace that is promoted by Russia, China, and their allies. I'm hoping that he submits and adapts to that and sees that that's the best business outcome, is to do that. And I know that
Yeah.
there's discussion where Putin will be in Beijing in early September. I was just reading this week, to celebrate the end of World War II. I mean, the Chinese lost something like 12 million civilians during the World War II itself. Many of them were victims of, human experimentation under Hiro Ishii, who got a job working for the Pentagon after World War II.
Oh, Unit
Um,
731, right?
yeah. That killed like 90,000 civilians and POWs
Yep.
through weaponized, smallpox and other forms of bacteria that they wanted to weaponize,
Hey,
which became
Matthew,
the
this just is
Mhm.
breaking right now. There's a fighting breaking out between Cambodia and Thailand.
Damn it. Damn it. Oh, see, that's the thing that really gets me. It really gets me. There's so many points of unnecessary,
Conflict.
just neighbors who have everything to gain by
Yes.
just realizing that they need to work together because their enemy is the same enemy
Yep.
that wants to kill them all, but they don't. There's these historic grudges and bigotry, and you got people in Burma who hate people in Thailand because of shit that happened 300 years ago in wars between the Burmese and the Thai that nobody has ever lived through, and don't even. I mean, it happened in the 18th century, and yet that is still a serious grudge amplified by MI6 agents on the ground in both countries trying to get conflict. And now you got Cambodia, which had a beef with Thailand for grievances 8, 9, 10 generations ago that are also being exploited, and now there's a fight going on there.
Yep.
It's like, come on. That makes me angry to see that there's that type of thinking. So yeah, let's keep our eyes on that one as it develops. That's interesting. I know also in you got India and China who have had a lot of grievances,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's been foreign manipulated. Though there has been some points of hope more recently where Jaishankar, the foreign minister of India, went and met with Wang Yi and Xi Jinping not that long ago, and they didn't come up with anything big, but at the very least, they did resolve to allow for visas to be extended back to Chinese citizens wishing to visit India for the first time in like 5 years. That just happened. So there's some effort being
And
made.
this is what kills me about
Um,
India. It
yeah,
really just grinds my gears here. There's such an infiltration, uh, a deeply entrenched British deep state that has actively been involved in India since forever.
Yeah.
And I don't know how India could ever move forward without expunging that cancer that's within them. I don't see it, man. I don't see it. And this is what we have, this weird flip-flopping. They're almost as bad as the Turks, if not worse, in terms of in what direction. Oh, one day they're with the BRICS and they're with the multipolar world. The next day they're laying prostrate between on the table of the British Empire. You know, it's insanity, man.
Yeah, it really is. And they've got strange deals with I think in July 1st of this year, India and the USA negotiated a 10-year cooperative military framework on defense cooperation. That
They
involves
could work on how they're going to lose the next battle together. They could work on that.
Yeah,
Because that whole India-Pakistan conflict was an eye-opener for me, Matthew. It really was. I think it was a shock to every Western military analyst out there in the world. Literally a shock. Because Rafales, French Rafales are nothing to sneeze at. Okay? And they were being shot out of the sky by Chinese J-10s like it was shooting fish in a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was that. If that didn't, cause people to take a step back and be like, "Hey, whoa, maybe war is not a good thing. Maybe we don't have this overwhelming superiority in technology and so on and so forth." But that all falls on deaf ears, and blind eyes.
Yeah, I know. It's wild. I still don't fully understand all of the details behind why that happened specifically. And did India really like?
It was supposedly that India blamed Pakistan for those terrorist attacks on the mountains, where it was like this whole, I think people were out there just celebrating a good time, and then there was a terrorist attack. Somebody shot up the place, and they blamed it on Pakistan. Pakistan had nothing to do with it. They
didn't carry out an investigation. They just
No.
immediately started launching strikes and they just cut off all relations with Pakistan. Then they picked a fight and carried out strikes back on Pakistan. But again, no investigation. It was the most belligerent thing you could possibly imagine.
And this is India. This is India, a country that's known to have a great diplomatic team that has some great diplomats on there. All of a sudden, that diplomacy just went out the window, and they're just lobbing missiles.
It reminds me of two things. We had this situation where Assad was accused of gassing his people. They invited the UN to do inspections, say, "Hey, prove that we gassed him." And like the Western countries are like, "No, you did it. We don't need to go investigate anything." And then, of course, they tried to start a war with them. It also reminds me of I think there were a couple of I think they were Brits who were wearing Middle Eastern type clothing and fake beards, going around shooting stuff up in Iraq, just like stirring up trouble. I think they got caught, and that was
the SAS.
It was the SAS, yeah. So
British SAS.
A couple of people partying near the border. Somebody starts shooting up a party, and no one wants to investigate it. They just want to launch jets.
Yeah, well, we saw that a lot with. I remember when I was doing political organizing on the streets of Montreal back in 2013, 2014, and there were many Syrian expats who would come here as refugees from the conflict that the West had induced into the Arab world. And they would tell me, like, "Oh, Bashar al-Assad, he's a butcher, he's a killer. You didn't see what he did to my village." And we're like, "What did he do? He killed half the people." And like, really? The Syrian government came in and killed half the people? And they're like, "No, it was people in masks." But they were all shouting, so people in masks were sent in to massacre villages, shouting, "Long live Bashar al-Assad," as they're killing civilians and babies.
Yeah.
And then the people who experience this, they don't know what's going on.
Operation Ajax reconstituted. That's exactly what it is.
Exactly. They're just peasants. They don't have a clear idea of what's going on in the world. Many of them don't have the internet even. They see what they see. They hear what they hear. They survived. Their families died. They got the hell out. And now they're obsessed with the idea that Bashar al-Assad was behind the thing that they experienced, but they don't realize Operation Ajax, British SAS techniques. That's what we did in Vietnam with Operation Fun and Games, where we would hire mercenaries to go in and just shoot up whole villages, and then convince the South, the Southerners, that those people who killed all of their loved ones were North Vietnamese communists. And the reality is that they were paid mercenaries by and being deployed and overseen by the Green Berets. Cynthia my wife did a whole deep dive on all of these techniques, and Colonel Fletcher Prouty also wrote a lot about this stuff too, these techniques. And then that would cause them to run into the embrace of the U.S. military-industrial complex to protect them from the big bad villains that they've been told to be afraid of. And they do this all the time, all over the world. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
but
concerned.
all. No, sorry, you going? Yeah.
Yeah, what's your opinion on what's happening here with the government? I think the wind was taken out of the sail with this whole Epstein thing. Others are saying, "Oh, this is part of a grander tactic and strategy," which I don't freaking see that at all. I see it for what it is. I think the most simplest explanation is the explanation, and it's what's your take, man, on the current administration, where we're headed here? I just get I'm just getting some whole bunch of bad vibes, Matt. I seriously am.
You know, you want to get some really bad vibes. Not that anybody wants to get bad vibes, but it gave me heebie-jeebies, and I do recommend sitting down and watching the full movie from 1989 with the wrestler Roddy Piper, called "They Live." And there's the famous
Yes.
snippet, the scene, where the guy puts on his sunglasses, where he sees, obey signs everywhere, where without the glasses, it just looks like normal New York or something. But watch the whole movie. Watch the whole movie from beginning to end. It's available on archive.org for free.
I'm here to do two things: kick ass and chew bubble gum.
That's it.
And I'm all out
Yeah.
of bubble gum.
Yeah, iconic, right? It's like, but I think that the general sick joke of the scripts that they're gaming is influenced in large measure by that particular film, including what this guy is induced to do, right? He's a normie. Everyone can identify with this Roddy Piper, again, professional wrestler. Not a great actor, but he doesn't need to be for that type of role. And he's just a guy who's naive. He thought in the popular, narrative of the U.S. liberty story, and discovers that the world's just kicking him in the ass, and it's more corrupt than he thought. And he lost his job because of outsourcing of heavy industry. He used to be a blue collar worker. Now he's out of work, living on the street, trying to make a buck. And he discovers that there's like this Alex Jones network of conspiracy theorists broadcasting through churches warnings about this alien takeover of the world that has happened somewhere along the way. And the collusion between the elites, the Rockefellers and all of these elites of the world, with these aliens to turn society into a depopulated slave state. And that's what globalization was all about. That's the story that he discovers. And when he starts putting on his sunglasses, he's very quickly, it's the effect he gets on the sunglasses is what you would expect one would have gotten from what's described of MK Ultra psychedelic mind control that was done on people who were put through, multi-day psychedelic experiments, ayahuasca journeys. So he's given like an altered state experience, him and his a guy who becomes his collaborator. And he very quickly becomes a domestic terrorist. Every time he puts on the glasses, he can all of a sudden see who are the shape-shifting aliens acting like humans and who are the real humans. So it's not very difficult for him to take a gun to kill a bunch of alien cops masquerading as humans, steal their guns, go into banks to shoot up all of the people who are the aliens, but everyone thinks that they're humans. It's like half the human population is aliens, and he kills half the people that he sees. And there's no remorse, there's no nothing. You're supposed to kind of catharsize as a viewer with this scenario, and then he finds his way into an underground city, where the aliens under New York have been working through tunnels and other things, to prepare for a takeover of the world. And basically, yeah, it's a cathartic journey to turn dumb, uneducated patriots into domestic terrorists based on the idea that what they're killing are lizard people, from specifically Andromeda. So that's largely, I've noticed that the coloring of, like, when you listen to Alex Jones speak, That's what he believes. He believes that aliens that are, in his mind, a fusion of demonic entities, silicon cosmic intelligences, have colluded with the governments of the world, the evil Illuminati, to mind control, ass rape humans, abduct them, and overall depopulate the world in favor of some takeover of the world as a prison planet. And that's Alex Jones is very explicit in his thinking on this, and as are many influencers of alt media at this point, who all, if you scratch behind the words that they use, many of the words that they use are fine for what they're doing, exposing evil things. But then when you look at their deeper thinking, they all think the same thing, that
Yeah.
either Palladian, aliens from Sirius, aliens from Andromeda, whatever, have all done this, and they have different colorings to their theories, but they're all the same thing.
Well, you got to understand,
aliens,
Matthew.
yeah,
You got to
Yeah.
understand, Matthew. I read all the white papers.
yeah,
And from my reading and understanding of the global deep state, is that the Palladians and the Nordic whites are here to help us. They're trying to
Yeah.
overthrow the deep state. They're working directly with Trump. And I know this ever since I started studying all the white papers from going into and sneaking into Bohemian Grove.
yes,
Exactly. Isn't
exactly.
there a General V that a high military person that also thinks that demons are essentially from another dimension or something along that? I mean, there's a lot of
There's been an
key
Air Force
thinkers.
study. There was 2 Air Force colonels that did a study on unidentified flying phenomenon, and they concluded that these beings, and from studying all of them, are not from another world, but they're somehow interdimensional.
Yes,
And
that
very
seems to be
similar to demons in the Bible.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus now that they're nudging us all towards, is that the aliens that they planted as an idea back in the 50s are not actually from our universe, though they can be, but they're generally from shape-shifting or shifting from another dimension, which is bringing in the Gnostic. It's basically the Gnostic cosmology
Yes.
of the demon archons, aeons, that Yaldabaoth and the associated array of elementals that could be channeled and harnessed by the sorcerers who know the right incantations and rituals to do their will in some thelemic exercise of harnessing demon power for the benefit of whoever's done the rituals, or inversely, whoever has the incantation of the good magic, the right rosemary beads, the right prayers to invoke the Jesus entity, the Jesus Christ avatar, to protect you. Yeah, and that can protect you from the demons, like a force field in this sci-fi fantasy battle of angels versus demons. So again, that's what they're doing, and they've sort of fused together demonology and ufology now with the transhumanist thing, all kind of converge in the same direction, which is always the idea, because they all evolved and were incubated by the exact same ideologues the whole time anyway. To reset, so that they targeted many people in military intelligence early on. I think that's the key thing. If you want to weaken a society and take it over, you got to first target the defenders, the guardians. So the people working in military intelligence are very high up on the list of enemy of all brainwashing, and they did that in the starting with 1948 with Project Grudge and Project Sign. That was not for the masses. That was for a grouping within military intelligence, within the Army, the Air Force intelligence, naval intelligence, that were the first to be initiated. And then the next generation, it would branch out to lower level people within the military who would be brought in within aerospace. And then eventually it could start being presented when it was incubated sufficiently in the late 70s to a broader base of the population in a more sort of with a more scientific veneer, because now you had the officials in the scientific world who had worked in the Manhattan Project, who had worked in the government, who had worked in NASA, who could now give authenticity to the testimonials, to the data, that otherwise, if you don't have authorities, this shit sounds crazy and nobody would accept it. So you needed to sort of do that. And so that's I think that's what Alex Jones is interfacing with, are people who have just been totally initiated. They think that they're part of some divine conspiracy with angels to fight back against the force of demons, or that they're part of the conspiracy with the demons, like the followers of Michael Aquino, a former Green Beret military intelligence officer who worked very closely with John Alexander and Jacques Vallée and the entire network of Hal Puthoff and the Scientologists, the high-level Scientologists that were overseeing the SRI experiments that involved a lot of trauma-based mind control, abuse of children in order to break them and induce schizophrenia in order to bring about mind powers of remote viewing, which they thought could be done best if the kids were broken first and had that thus the gift of the touch of being outer body, right? Which that's how they see schizophrenia as like a gifted thing because people are broken from their ego and now they're pure conduits or channelers of the beyond. So you gotta how do you break kids to there's a number of ways to do it. And I think everyone watching has an understanding of that to varying degrees. So the whole Epstein thing, as far as I see it, to get back to Epstein, I think it's a small part of a much bigger picture. And it seems like it was almost fetishized to a degree which reduced it of the actual value of what this story represented as a gateway into a bigger picture. It became itself, because that's the only value I see with the Epstein story, just like with the Weinstein story, the Hollywood sex abuser, it was Weinstein, Weinstein, right? Yeah. Is that this was a channel, a gateway into a conversation to expose the bigger nefarious underpinnings that have been involved, have been tied to global child sacrifice, other forms of things that go back to ancient times. And I mean, we know that we have got Jimmy Savile. As soon as he dies, it's revealed that he's had thousands of victims, mostly children, a lot of necrophilia as well. Like this guy's the rumor of King Charles. He's a mentor of Charles. He's a mentor of Prince Andrew, who's part of the Epstein network. He's a guy who partied with the Rolling Stones with Prince Philip, the deadly virus guy, who has a huge network of high-level British pedophiles that it has been proven, but nobody's gone to jail. Nobody's really, or very few people have suffered justice.
None.
Everyone's protected. Thousands and thousands of children have been abused, if not millions. That's one. You've got Peter Nygaard in the Canadian Swedish transhumanist freak who's also sort of the Canadian Epstein, who's also got a huge network that overlaps the Epstein thing. You've got the Pizzagate stuff that ties into the Washington elite, and it's like all of this stuff brings us into a direct. If we're using that information properly, we can be quickly brought into a set of discoveries about the control grid of the empire. But people started treating Epstein as if this was kind of like the silver bullet that would make all of our problems go away. And if we just saw the Epstein files, saw the lists of who has been on the plane, all of the fears we have of the future and the bad guys would just fall apart, and we'll be happy again, and we can go back to normal. And that turned it into a magical charm, and it was unhealthy at that point. So whatever the hell the Epstein thing is, I think it became divested of its influence as something really useful when people started psychologically obsessing over it in this unhealthy way. But number two, is I think Elon Musk has always been part of this magic trick, and I think that people say, oh, the Trump Elon breakup was all kayfabe and World Wrestling Federation. That might be true. That might be true. However, I don't think it's a good thing. And I think that the plan was always to capture the MAGA movement, this genuinely American anti-imperial spirit that wants to revive the best of America and make America viable again, which rallied itself around the figure of Trump in 2016 to 2020. I think that movement has been targeted for being broken up as part of a broader plan to induce the US to go into a civil war. And I think Elon is just fulfilling. I think the idea of him creating a new party was already baked into the script that was given around what excuse would we give for him breaking up with Trump, and it became the Epstein thing. Trump is on the Epstein list, blah blah blah, and the idea was always to get the disenfranchised Trump supporters who've become very alienated with Trump over his support for Israel, over his bombing of other countries. There's like 6 countries that have been bombed, but under Trump's first term, pretty badly. A lot of death has happened. Very difficult to excuse. And I mean, I get how some people are playing the game of kings and trying to think like the oligarch and in a very objective way about power politics. But at the same time, the death of innocence is very clear and very difficult to think that that was the only way to do it. That being said, I think that when Elon announced the political party, I think it's fulfilling a ritual premised around the dark MAGA idea. And I think the dark MAGA that he announced is part of a psychological hypnotic induction, because up until now, the MAGA movement has not done what it's supposed to do. They haven't gone violent. Think about that, the They Live movie with Roddy Piper, right? Like, what the oligarchy wants is for the MAGA movement to get violent, to start shooting some liberals. They want that. They want to push people to the brink of suffocation, so that all they can do is to feel empowered, is break things and kill. So they want that as part of their broader ritual to induce the US into a new civil war. They haven't been able to get that so far. Americans and even Canadian conservatives have been too wise to fall for many of these traps during the Freedom Convoy and other things, though they're going to keep on trying to put the pressure on. So I think the dark MAGA was a way to channel our dark energy, the darkness with, it's a very Jungian formula that Carl Jung had this whole idea of tapping into and embracing our inner darkness, our shadow, and then using the shadow as an aggressive force of creative expression in various ways that would help us overcome problems in life that are there because of our fears and insecurities. So part of that is the idea that the conscience is keeping us held back from our creative expression. Our moral values are acting like a crutch, and we have to overcome that by becoming more courageous. And so when I look at Elon, I look at his grandfather as part of, the Joshua Haldeman operation, and the fact that Haldeman was the expert at building up third parties in the 1930s and 40s, and he was the head of Technocracy Inc. Incorporated, which Elon has referred to very fondly. Elon just being a cardboard synthetic cutout in my mind, but his grandfather was also not, he didn't just call for creating a technocracy, a tech native North America that would involve getting rid of dollars and currency and elected governments in order to move power to an unelected agency of scientific engineers and experts who would artificially induce the destruction of civilization first. That was part of the Haldeman formula, was a mass strike of the scientific engineers who would control the levers of production, who could coordinate on a coordinated level, shut it all down in order to then control the terms of its restart under the form of what they would create as a technate that would allocate credit scores that people could access that would expire to every citizen based upon how many calories people need to survive and how much energy generally can be calculated or quantified that an average human being should be allowed to expect to use. And that's how they would define the value system of the technate currency that would involve Greenland all the way to Panama. Also, before that, though, because that was not successful, he got thrown in jail in 1940 for being on the wrong side of World War II. This was clearly fascist agency. So he was arrested, Joshua Haldeman. Before he did Technocracy Inc., though, he was the head of the Saskatchewan branch of the Canadian Fabian Society and directly participated in the authoring of the Regina Manifesto in 1932 or 1933, which was a manifesto that called for the overthrow of capitalism and the creation of a new scientific dictatorship under scientifically managed society under the Fabian. And that at that time, that branch, it was run by 4 or 5 Rhodes Scholars, one of whom went on to found NATO. The other one was a handler of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It was called the League for Social Reconstruction. Their political branch became known as the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, which Joshua Haldeman ran for 3 years. And then it changed its name into the NDP. And at that time in the 60s, many of its leading controllers went and, like a virus, took over the host cell of the Liberal Party from 1958 to 63, which is the period of this viral takeover. So then the Fabian Society sort of controlled both the orange NDP as well as the red Liberals of Canada after that moment with Pierre Elliott Trudeau onward. That's what's behind the universal healthcare system of Canada, is these guys. The idea was to always create a control mechanism to make it more favorable, not to sustain Canadian health of the citizenry, but rather at a time of crisis to better have a command and control over the mass killing of useless eaters, which was always the reason why these guys in their inner core did universal healthcare. I'm for universal healthcare, but I'm not for this variety of it because the agenda was always depopulation. So all that to say, this is the thing. Oh yeah, and then afterwards, Elon Musk's grandfather, when he gets out of jail, he then goes and creates another third party called the Social Credit Party of Saskatchewan that he leads for another 6 years before that doesn't work. Which, by the way, the Social Credit Party of Canada that he runs from 1943 to 1949, and he runs for parliamentary office in Canada. He's not successful, but it's itself created by this guy Major C.H. Douglas. And C.H. Douglas, who creates it as a British intelligence operative of the World War I to 1920s period, who was a disciple of A.J. Oraj. A.J. Oraj is the head, the architect of New Age magazine. It's a theosophical journal. He's a theosophist, a Luciferian. He runs New Age magazine. He publishes Aleister Crowley, works with Aleister Crowley. He's the disciple of Gurdjieff, his personal secretary of Gurdjieff, who's himself also in a high-level occult intelligence operative. So that's what Oraj is a part of. That's what C.H. Douglas is a part of. That's what creates the social credit system of Canada. That then becomes the government of Alberta and the government of British Columbia that brings in eugenics in the 1930s, 31 to 33, before the Nazis do. And so this is what Joshua Haldeman was trying to bring into Saskatchewan. This is what, when it failed, this is why he chose to go to the freest place on the globe in 1949, which he deemed as South Africa, which had just embraced apartheid and created a multi-tier system categorizing different species of human from the purity of the Aryan Nordic group races, all the way down to the mixed races who would have less rights, down to the purely blacks, most inferior of the races. And they had something like 9 different species types of human who would all be graded with different types of credit systems, be allocated to different districts that they would be allowed to live in South Africa. It was disgusting, but that's what he thought was the greatest representative government of freedom against Jewish global banking mafias. And he was a polemicist. He published books going through the protocols of Zion, calling out the international Rothschild banking empire that's trying to enslave the world. So he sounds a lot like your typical modern conspiracy theorist when you read Joshua Haldeman's writings. And he spends his time looking for this theosophical, mythical, underground city of Kalahari in the desert, and he ends up disappearing. Some say he didn't die. He went, I don't know. But some say he went on to become a leader of Silicon Valley. I don't know if that's true or not. But point being is, this is Elon Musk's grandfather who gives birth, who fathers his mother, who seems to be a techno witch, probably a sorceress. It seems there's a lot of evidence that Elon Musk's May Musk is a sorceress. She's definitely into some very, very strange aesthetics. Mm-hmm. And Elon has himself chosen to, name one of his children a sequence of numbers and X's, which is exactly what you had to do if you were a member of Technocracy Inc. in the 1930s. You had to give up your name and replace it with a series of numbers and X's.
Alphanumeric name. Yeah.
So you've got this type of thing. He's clearly not a smart person. Like, he's been a reputation has been cultivated around the brand of Elon as this, pseudo-autistic genius who's too brilliant to be able to defend or even expound upon the discoveries that are attributed to him, like all 19 patents. He can't expound upon how he discovered anything in public. He can't defend himself or his ideas in public, but that's because he's too brilliant to do so, they say. So he seems to fit all of the parameters of a cardboard cutout to me. And I think his usefulness now at trying to absorb and invoke this more dark spirit within disenfranchised, angry American patriots is a part of a broader plan to get the U.S. to self-cannibalize. So that's part of what I think of the Epstein story is how it's been used to be a part of this whole thing, and to evade the fact that there is this actual, very real, again, Pizzagate, the Podestas, all that stuff. That's what Marina Abramovich is as an advisor to world leaders and representative of children's health in Ukraine as the Ukrainian ambassador to children. Like what she represents, that's like the real story that people should be focusing on and discovering more about. And instead they get fixated on this object called this magic bullet called Epstein Island. And it's devoid of what it could be as far as a potent thing,
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of these large events, whether it be, COVID or whatever, I think they're used for multiple things. And
Mm.
so, there's been a lot of pressure put on the current administration with people who are angry about it. I don't think it's a silver bullet. I don't really think it would solve very much at all. When it comes to Elon, though, and when you said dark MAGA, what I wanted to say and what came to mind was, I don't know if it was like right after the inauguration, it might have been a key signature of some kind of law, but Elon was wearing a MAGA hat, but it was like all black with black print on it. And I had never seen one of those before. So he's, as you see in the audience, people are talking about him being a cutout. Wasn't his family, weren't they emerald miners in Africa?
Yes.
Isn't that? Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Errol Musk was had an emerald mine, and they bragged earlier on about the riches that they couldn't even close their safe box at home. And yet Elon was passing himself off. So this is the disingenuity of the branding of Elon, who sold himself as a personality to the public as being somebody who lived, was a suffering student living in poverty, having to sleep on couches. That he was just totally a self-made kid, a Stanford dropout, but just so brilliant the schools couldn't contain him, which is always the same sort of story that they do for all of these Silicon Valley cutout types.
Yeah, we see it with Bezos and everybody else too.
Yeah, Zuckerberg. Yeah, sure. No, I'm sorry. If you look at the actual programs that were at the origins of the creation of social media and Facebook itself and Meta, that these were all parts of DARPA back in the 70s and 80s. Like it was being developed by the direct continuity of the secret science programs of the Manhattan Project that never disappeared, but that took on a variety of forms. That generated the internet and all of these sub-projects that utilized psychiatrists from Tavistock to shape the idea of social networks to get people to self-control, self-profile, and better manage the herd. That then was marketed once it was incubated and developed to a sufficient extent in the early 2000s to become something that people would willfully, voluntarily sign on to, utilizing some front person that could be given credit for being the great genius behind it all. But it was never that. And that was always the agreement. And Elon, as well as Peter Thiel, seem to fit those profiles perfectly. But yeah, his dad, it was later admitted, gave him the seed capital for his first venture, Zip2 or something, that was then sold to Compaq in 1997, and made him his first tranche of a few $1 million. His mom also gave him like 10,000. His dad gave him 20,000 early on. So they were already at the get-go pouring cash, developing this asset, who was brought to Saskatchewan before being sent down to, I guess it was Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, and then to Stanford, where he got ultimately recruited and deployed in the Silicon Valley machine. But they were always there. And now his dad's being brought back into play in a weird way too, right? He shows up all of a sudden in Russia, speaking at conferences next to Lavrov. Clearly, they're trying to use the Elon and his father, Errol, who's married to his kid, by the way. Like his stepdaughter, he married his stepdaughter and did a Woody Allen baby, basically. He did a Woody Allen. And this girl that he raised from like babyhood.
It's fucking sick.
Yeah. So his aunt is also, or his stepmother is his sister, Elon, which is strange. And then I think they're trying to market these guys in some weird way to charm the intelligentsia of Russia. Utilizing
it doesn't work though. It's not working over there.
Not really, but at the same time, there are weak spots in Russia that cause me some concern, and China. Like I think they're sort of using Elon as, they've tried to use him as a bit of like a back channel envoy or emissary, bringing his kid to China to try to like cozy up or negotiate with Xi Jinping or represent the interests of a faction within the oligarchy of the West with Xi Jinping, which Xi Jinping basically refused to deal with. Mark Zuckerberg earlier had been sent to meet up with China, with Xi Jinping, to try to serve as the same role of an emissary when he asked Xi Jinping to even give the name to his new kid, Xi Jinping was like, no, that's not appropriate. I'm not going to do that publicly, and humiliated Zuckerberg, rightfully so. Elon has a lot of his Tesla assets in China and was granted a lot of independence, a ridiculous amount of independence to operate very, very much outside of government supervision in China and own the properties that he took control of as part of an original deal with a faction of the Western oligarchy. But that's been, it seems, canceled and reined in, especially with the realization that they're not able to get China on board. And so they've gone for a more threatening approach to China on one level. It's a very hot, cold idea, right? They're using it's a strategy of provide hardcore threats and then warm, so carrots and stick, or carrots and cake. Sticks and cake. And now you have a discussion of maybe Trump is going to show up in China to meet up with Lavrov and Xi Jinping in September. Chinese have said that they know nothing of this. The Russians have said that they would welcome this. The Americans said that they're open to this. But, a lot of this is a game of like, this is what bothers me, is that a lot of the techniques that I've studied from my research on Tavistokian techniques, and that my wife has also written about, a lot of that has been deployed as far as what's shaping the strategy of Trump's foreign policy and broader messaging to his domestic base, to the population, and to foreign leaders. It makes it very difficult, and this could be done in a good way, to throw off your enemies. If nobody knows what you're going to do, right, you can hide your intention behind masks. That could be useful. But what is the real intention? I'm hoping, and I haven't let go. It hasn't been fully disproven to me that there's not an authentic honesty within Trump that is ultimately trying to move the US towards some collaboration with Russia and China on something good. That's not fully out of my heart, but I'm looking at a lot of very disturbing facts that are also making me very disturbed. And that especially many of his supporters and many people around the world don't know how to use their own judgment anymore. They're just like falling apart mentally because they're getting so many it's like the Tavistock. What did the Tavistocks do to their guinea pigs for the, this is what was running MK Ultra, is that they would spend one day rewarding their human guinea pigs for telling lies, and then the next day they would start punishing them for telling lies, and then they would reward them the next day and reward them the day after, but then they would punish them the day after. And so what they found was that you could break down within a very short period of time people's ability to cast judgment, to even use discernment. They had no faith in their own internal powers of thinking, and would defer their judgment to authorities that were not them, right? And that was something that they noticed within Vietnam, which was a giant Tavistockian science experiment on drugs, on drug use being used on traumatized men who were being induced to kill innocent people. What would that do? Generals who are part of the Michael Aquino network that were running things like Operation Phoenix were giving contrary messaging, saying one day take the hill, one day run away from the hill, one day kill this village, one day protect that same village that you were now killing the people in that village with things like the My Lai massacre. But the day before they were like protecting that village, and now they have to kill it. And they're all like, all of these soldiers are being given contrary messaging that's breaking them, but they do have a lot of heroin, right? So, yeah. And they do have a lot of sex. So there's all of a sudden like tons of broken families and a broken economy. So a lot of women are now willing prostitutes, not willing, but they have to survive. So you got sex, you got drugs, you got trauma, you got satanic cults forming left and right, who then come back to the United States, one with a bunch of broken men. 50,000, U.S. troops were killed. A lot of it was overseen by the mass killing, the elite, the elite sort of mercenaries of the U.S. military, which was the Green Berets. Like the Green Berets do the most like hardcore. That's who you send in to do the shit that nobody else wants to do. Is the Green Berets. They're the most brainwashed, like machines, human machines that are turned into insane people. So you got these that are sent out to do that work, and then they break a whole generation of young baby boomers, right? Who have just watched John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King dying. They've been part of wars that they never should have experienced. And some of the leading factions then are brought back to run things like the Stanford Research Institute's MK Ultra mind control operations. They're the ones who are doing things with Anton LaVey at the Temple of Satan.
Satanic Church. Yeah.
Yeah, the Satanic Church, which Michael Aquino is a lieutenant of before he created his Temple of Set to usher in the new age of Horus, or the Age of Aquarius, as it was also known.
All these crazy mythologies, man.
I know, man, but
so interlinked to these broken personalities.
it totally is. It
Because
really
they need
is.
something outside of God Himself to cling to. People, humanity, whether you're a vile globalist elitist or you're a pauper on the streets, somebody's believing in something, and it's so integral to the human experience. And you got these psychos who believe this crazy stuff, which gives them some sort of a justification to do whatever the heck it is that they do to the rest of us.
Yep, absolutely. And I would just say, like, Peter Thiel seems to be a really key guy in a lot of this, but he and Elon have both been co-groomed around the same time, fulfilling the same roles at every step of the way throughout the 90s onward, right? And Thiel might be a bit smarter, but at the same time, like, he was recruited by at the Stanford Research Institute. Sorry, not at Stanford, when he was working there at running the Libertarian Review. He was recruited by the head of the Opus Dei of who's running the California jurisdiction, whose name I forgot. The Opus Dei is the radical sort of pseudo Jesuit, like, right hand path to the Jesuit. So the Jesuits created, it seems, this secretive order in the 1920s in Spain, which took control of the Spanish government of Franco. Half the members of the Franco government were members of Opus Dei. Franco himself had this guy Escriva, who was the founder, who had a vision, a mystical vision, who became his personal guru of Franco. They ran major banking complexes across Europe, and they seeded themselves into the United States in especially the 70s. And the head of Opus Dei of the California jurisdiction was one of the early mentors of Peter Thiel. These are the people who do, like, self-flagellation. They walk around with, like, that stuff from the Da Vinci Code, from the Dan Brown book. That's actually stuff that they do. If you're an Opus Dei member, full on, yeah, you have to walk around with, like, metal girders on your or like metal teeth poking into your legs every day. Like, you have to whip yourself as part of this ritual cleansing. So that's part of what has seeped into the United States. It's all over Heritage, the Heritage Foundation, which created Project 2025, which Trump, to his credit, did try to distance himself from early on, trying to distinguish his Agenda 47 as different from, and it's true, it was different from Agenda 2025. However, I'm looking at a lot of the policies today, and they're very much more in sync with Project 2025 than I formerly was willing to admit. Now I'm looking at it, I'm seeing a lot of influence there. But yeah, Peter Thiel did that in when he co-founded the thing that became X with Elon Musk. Like, they co-created PayPal together. He talks about the value of the symbol of X in his 2007 Straussian moment essay, and in that essay, he describes that people should read it. Actually, just it's in my book. I wrote a book I have a whole chapter. Which one is it here? This one, the Rosicrucian Golem, which has Elon there up here. Next to the Rosicrucian cross, and you got Nikola Tesla, Isaac Newton, Darwin as different Rosicrucian cardboard cutouts that are part of this broader ritual to keep humanity's scientific imagination locked in a little controlled box. But in I think it's chapter 14, I have a thing on Peter Thiel, and he's a self-professed Straussian. He describes how he situates his identity within the Straussian movement that took over the Republican Party. These are the followers of Leo Strauss, who believed in a secret doctrine of Plato, that one can read the cryptic codes that allows you to recognize that Plato was actually Thrasymachus. He was actually Gorgias. He was Callicles. He was the characters who, even though he on the surface for dumb people, Plato tried to refute the philosophy of these figures who were basically like proto-Nietzsche's. They were of the view that justice is what is justice? Justice is defined by the power of the strong to destroy their enemies and reward their friends and satisfy their lusts and avoid pain. And that's justice in the mind of Thrasymachos at the beginning of the Republic. It's the same thing for Gorgias or Callicles. It's the same thing for Nietzsche. So the Straussians would say, oh, no, you can't believe what Plato's actually saying. You have to see the secret coding where Plato is actually saying that that the wise man truly is Thrasymachos. He is Callicles. And that the naive idiot philosopher is the person who believes in morality and justice. And only the strong can control the noble lies that create the narratives that will induce the stupid masses who believe in morality and God and things like that into enslaving themselves. And this is the grouping that came. This is what what Donald Rumsfeld, Richard Pearl, who, by the way, Richard Pearl became the early sponsor of Peter Thiel at Stanford in 1988 when he set up the Stanford Libertarian Review that promoted. Yeah, so that was actually Richard Pearl, who sponsored Peter Thiel, who continued to sponsor Peter Thiel, who introduced him to In-Q-Tel executives. That was the CIA venture capital front group set up in 1997. That In-Q-Tel CIA tech group was introduced to Peter Thiel by Richard Pearl. And Richard Pearl's the same guy who worked with Wolfowitz and others to create the Project for New American Century, to oversee 9/11, other shit. And John Poindexter, who was the former manager of, he's the guy who created the continuity of government, the shadow government agenda back in the 80s when he was overseeing Iran-Contra with Oliver North. That John Poindexter, who went to jail, was later rehabilitated by the Straussians that took over with George Bush and Cheney. And he was given control of, he was the architect of the total information awareness, that defunct effort by the US government in 2002 with that featured sort of the all-seeing eye, overseeing like all aspects of human life to surveil everybody at all times. That was defunct because people didn't want to just give up their personal privacy and freedom at that time. So they immediately, John Poindexter, as soon as that is canceled, he meets up through Richard Pearl with Peter Thiel. And together they organize a civilian version front group to do the exact same thing, which becomes Palantir.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time that Elon Musk is being introduced to In-Q-Tel executives who take him to Russia in 2003 with his newly acquired capital they got from selling PayPal. So now he's sitting on a lot of money, like $25 million at the time, maybe more. And now he's taken to Russia to start a new space tech private company. And he's like shopping around to buy like Russian missiles that could be used as the basis of new private rockets. And so the guy who's giving him the tour of Russia and introducing him to contacts is one of the top executives at In-Q-Tel. And this is what gets set up eventually and becomes Starlink, as well as Tesla. So you got this thing which is clearly identifiable, very much tied to the occult. And again, read Peter Thiel's paper. He goes through, it's a very Gnostic thing, that there's a secret teaching of Jesus that is contained within the apocryphal text.
Yeah,
and that's it's like the secret teaching of Plato, it's the secret teaching of Muhammad, it's the secret teaching of Hobbes and Locke, and he goes through all of that stuff, situating himself directly within the Gnostic tradition that presumes that there are archons, aeons, elementals, that the God that we all believe in, or that Christian civilization has been led to believe in, is an evil God. A Yaldabaoth, a dark god who's actually a demiurge, a lower deity who is not a real god but a sociopath, a mutant who created this evil world in his evil image of ignorance and self-deceit. And that's what morality is. That's what gave rise to all human civilization, was these beliefs, and that the real freedom-loving elites recognize that what we thought was good is actually evil, and that what is evil is actually good, and that to do the true good is to defeat the God of the Bible and of the naive reading of the Quran that teaches people to do good to their neighbor. And we have to overthrow all of those things and restore the age of Lucifer. And this is the age of Aquarius. This is the age of Horus. This is the Lucifer rising idea of Kenneth Anger and Madame Blavatsky. So this is the thing that fucked up the Indians too, right? Because I mean, who captured the Indian resistance in the 1880s? It was the Theosophists, a bunch of high-level Theosophist followers of Blavatsky, like Otto Octavian Hume, ended up setting up and creating the India Congress Party to capture all of the Indians that wanted to liberate themselves from British imperialism, which was super genocidal. And they were absorbed into this controlled pressure valve that then became headed by Annie Besant, the woman who's a Fabian Society leader, a eugenicist, who becomes the head of the Theosophists, and she's the president of the India Congress Party. She's training Mohandas Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, and she's like, and Homi Bhabha, like all of these guys are being initiated into the Fabians. They're being introduced, especially Gandhi is being introduced to how to read the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas through his the theosophical study groups in London, who are teaching him how to get in touch with his own Indian culture. And that's what's like grooming this guy, who's then being sent back to become, this is a huge force in Indian history that has had good people emerge within it from time to time, but it's got this contamination, which has allowed for major blinders in the Indian establishment to not realize how the British have been psychologically manipulating and destroying that beautiful civilization's ability to truly be free and independent. And we're feeling it today with these weird maneuvers that are so self-sabotaging. It's bewildering. When India's part of the BRICS, they're part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, right? They've got this wonderful capacity to just work with their neighbors and offer so much to the world around them, and it's in their interest to work with Pakistan on economic development and work with China on major development projects tied to the Belt and Road Initiative. They don't have to do any of these self-destructive things that they're doing right now, but they're doing it. So why? I think it has a lot to do with this deep state complex that's been baked into their system from the days of Blavatsky's followers, who set up their thing. So, all of the stuff, it's fascinating to look at history this way. Definitely it takes a strong stomach in other ways, but you also see where the oligarchy has been weak and what they're afraid of too, because there have been these brilliant moments of beauty that humanity has been able to come up with that has disrupted the oligarchy. Despite all of its power and ancient influence, despite all of that, there's been something that has reduced its ability to exert influence over their victims. And I think that's the thing that gives me hope. And I think that the Eurasian intelligentsia right now are pretty in tune. To what degree, I don't know, but they're quite in tune with its techniques and with especially what is beautiful about humanity and what can make us overcome this fire. So yeah, I mean that's my briefing for today. I guess I don't know what else I would add beyond those.
No, very well said, man. And we covered a lot of ground, and I'll recommend people going back and listening to this again and taking the notes that are necessary, because there's a lot of critical and vital information here. So, Matt, thank you so much, man, for coming on, and I'd like to have you on again, man, like next week if you want to get back on the ball. We're the multipolar reality, baby. That's what it is. The multipolar reality. What do you want to name it?
I don't know. Let's brainstorm another name. I feel like we could do better.
Okay.
But yeah, sure. Let's start by making this a bit more of a semi-regular occurrence again. And yeah, let's do it. Let's do it next week for sure. Okay.
Perfect. The gang is all together again, folks. Check us out, RogueNews.com. With that being said, Cowboy, take it away.